As a young person living in America right now, I find it impossible to invest in the current system. I cannot invest time and energy and effort into the system as it currently exists. It is untenable. American system, the unchecked, unbalanced, raging greed capitalist culture we have here is completely untenable and literally killing people. I need it to die.
This has been my exact thought process for the last couple days, and I haven't found a way to articulate it. Life in America is too fucking hard for the 99%. And I know I'm going to get comments saying how privileged I am as compared to someone living in a developing nation, and they are correct. However, that does not make my life or the lives of other people living in America easier in America. I work full-time, or at least I did until this past Friday. My boss told my manager and I, who are the only people who work at our location, that our hours were being cut almost in half. While working full-time, I can barely afford my rent on 2 weeks' pay. Even working full-time, I have had to borrow money to get food sometimes. And again, I know the comments are gonna be like, get a new job. I am trying. I've been applying to jobs for weeks, and besides one rejection, the only responses I got were from 2 scams. And no, I'm not applying for like CEO positions. The things I'm applying for are very like menial jobs that you all say can be easily staffed. And speaking of those scams, there were people who fell for those scams whose lives will now be harder because of that. And I don't want to hear that they're stupid for falling for it. Scammers should not exist. And yet scams are more common than ever right now in the US. And as mentioned in the Stitch video, I walk through life and I feel insane. Like I should not be working this much and not be able to live. As I apply for new jobs, all I can think is, this is pointless. I'm going to continue struggling. I'll probably be working hours that don't allow me to audition, which is the whole reason that I moved here. So what I wanted to do was take a few weeks, save up a month's rent, and then start applying for jobs. Get a part-time job, quit my full-time job, and then I'd have the rent money while I looked for a second part-time job. But I don't make enough money to save up 1 month's rent. Yet all we were told growing up was that hard work would make you successful. Today while I was doing my dog walks, I was listening to a past episode of the podcast Search Engine, which covered this story about this disabled woman, Corianne, who was trying to get Section 8 housing in Wyoming, I believe. And when she got a voucher after years of waiting, it turned out that the apartment she was offered didn't exist. Corianne has epilepsy, she cannot work, and yet she was told over and over that she did not qualify for disability or for Section 8 housing. And the podcast also interviewed this woman who studies the welfare system in our country, among many other things. And she was saying that Corianne getting a voucher after just a year and a half on the wait list is like actually miraculous, because it usually takes between 5 and 8 years to get a voucher. But even once you get one, Corianne said that you only have a month for you, the voucher holder, to find an apartment that fits within the very strict parameters that the voucher allows. And those parameters apply to pretty much no housing in the US. For example, I think Corianne's voucher was for like $645, and that not only had to cover rent for the apartment that she'd find on her own, but also all utilities. If you've looked for an apartment anytime in the last couple years, you know that that's impossible. Most studios are going for over $1,000 a month. Many are over $2,000 or more. And that does not include utilities. Corianne also points out that even though the Section 8 system has the phone number of everybody on the waiting list, if someone is being offered a voucher, the only way that they will be notified of this is through the mail. But many of the people on the waiting list are unhoused, or they're couch surfing. They don't have a permanent address. So even if they get off the waiting list, they'll never know, because they will never get the piece of mail telling them that. Life is impossible here. Even $100K a year is barely enough to survive comfortably. And that's if you don't have a medical emergency or something like that. And if you complain, you're told to move or get a new job or something equally difficult. Most people can't just pick up and move. Especially if you own your house, it takes a lot of money to go through the house selling and I assume house buying process. But even if you rent, breaking a lease is very pricey. People have been applying to jobs for a year and they get a handful of rejections and never hear from anybody else. Most of us do not hold the keys to the doors that you want us to go through. And yet the people who hold those keys keep telling us that they'll give them to us if we just want them hard enough.